Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
Hello everyone, this is Jack with the Book Club from Hell, cowering wretches of the West's winter, waiting for a Caesar to ease our passing. I was joined for this week's episode by Edward. We talked about Esoteric Trumpism, a book written by Constantin von Hoffmeister and published in 2024. Hoffmeister, who translated Spengler's Decline of the West for Arctos Media, promises to examine Donald Trump from a Spenglerian perspective, while also drawing influences from H.P. Lovecraft, Conan the Barbarian, the Bible, and more. If you like what we're doing with this podcast and want to support us, we have a Patreon account, the link to which is in the show notes. We release bonus episodes on Patreon and have weekly chats with subscribers about our most recent episodes. I've also published a novel called Tower, a surreal, absurd journey involving the medical treatment of souls, a tower who remakes the world in its image, amphetamines, and a talking briefcase. You can find Tower on Amazon or Apple Books, the links to which are in the show notes. So, if you're ready to hear about a collection of inventive Trump fanfic pieces, then listen on. Enjoy. I was a bit disappointed with this book.
Yeah, I think I was definitely disappointed with this book. I probably read like 60% of it. Then I skipped to the last two chapters, read those, and then this morning I listened to an hour-long podcast with Hoffmeister talking about the book with like the fucking weird interviewer from Arctos Books. Have you watched that?
No, I didn't end up watching any interviews with Constantin von Hoffmeister. I've heard interviews of him with what's his name? It's the owner of Arctos Media. I've heard them interviewed together. And right. Constantin von Hoffmeister, because I first came across him because he translated the Arctos edition of The Decline of the West. He either translated or edited it. And there are notes from him in the text, and they come across as so incredibly pretentious. The sort of comments that a person named Constantin von Hoffmeister would make. And then hearing him interviewed, I thought, yep, this sounds like the man that I imagined he would be. And then reading this book was a new side of him, at least, because I didn't anticipate that he liked Conan the Barbarian quite as much as he does.
Sorry, I missed the last 10 seconds of what you said.
I said that this book is a new side of Constantin von Hoffmeister in the sense that, yes, he's both as erudite and as impressed with his erudition as I expected. But I didn't anticipate that he would like Conan the Barbarian quite as much as he does, that it would resonate with him to this extent.
I've got to say, it was one of the more difficult things for me about this book was just like all of the references to like mythology and even stuff like Star Wars, which I have a passing familiarity with from childhood. And then like I think there were like some comic book references and stuff like that, like stuff about He-Man, which I just didn't really get. And I sort of got the impression, like my impression was that what I was hoping for from this book was like a coherent piece of literature that sort of had a bit of a story or a thesis from beginning to end. But it seemed like Constantin von Hoffmeister has just read a bunch of stuff, is sort of academically well-versed enough in it that he's probably written some undergraduate papers, probably, I don't know, maybe a master's, who knows, maybe a PhD. But then he was just sort of like getting a very low-resolution idea of Trump or the mythology of Trump and then just forcing it through the lens of a whole bunch of different sort of cultural paradigms. It was sort of weird. So we had like, you know, interpreted through the lens of Stanley Kubrick films, interpreted through the lens of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry, interpreted through the lens like and the start of it seemed a little bit promising because he was sort of writing in this I don't know, quasi Edgar Allan Poe, portentous, semi-biblical, mythological sort of framing where, you know, he's sort of building up a story of Trump and it seemed like it might be fun, but it didn't really, I don't know, it didn't really pay off, I found. And it just sort of descended into tedious, like 3-page undergraduate essays on Trump interpreted through this and that. What do you think?
That's more forgiving or more generous than I guess I would have been. I don't know. It depends in which respect I'm talking about being generous. So, as to your point about him writing a series of undergraduate essays, I felt that these were much more reminiscent of blog posts, and because he does some sort of online column for Arctos Media, I felt like this was basically him collecting together a bunch of things about Donald Trump that he would have put up on the Arctos website, and instead of doing that, putting it together into a book and selling it through Arctos. I, like you, was really hoping that this would be an extended essay or like a short book on Trump viewed through Oswald Spengler. Because this guy obviously knows a lot about Spengler. He either edited or translated Spengler. I forget which. But yeah, I was really hoping for a Spenglerian analysis of Donald Trump for 140 pages or so. And was quite looking forward to that because it's kooky, but there's also there's enough sort of I guess internally consistent kookiness in Spengler's writing that it would be very fun, or at least it has the potential to be very fun. But this book really wasn't that. It really is a series of essays that they're united by the fact that they are about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And some they'll have like a theme. So you brought up Edgar Allan Poe. It feels it's a very high school or maybe first year undergrad way of interacting with a theme, in that Hoffmeister will basically like say something about Trump and then quote Edgar Allan Poe, and then after the quote say, "This demonstrates this aspect of Donald Trump."
Yeah.
And it's done in that quite formulaic way, to the point where I was having flashbacks to being 18 and being in year 12 and writing English essays and writing in this very way. It's just no one would have published anything I wrote at that point. No one should, because it sounds like a high school student writing rote essays for high school examinations. This almost feels like a collection of blog posts crossed with high school essays, but about Donald Trump leading a post-apocalyptic motorcycle gang.
Yeah, I found I agree on like the point about the sort of like first year undergraduate essay writing is definitely right, because like I had the same experience. Like there was some point where he kept using a phrase like "there is no doubt that" to like just like force a complete like to force the appearance of logic on what was just like a completely absurd logical leap. And it's just like, and it was so sort of thin. I mean, I didn't really want like heavy details about Donald Trump, because that's not what this book should have been about. But at the same time, like I didn't learn anything new. And he sort of just like got like commonly known media details of Donald Trump and just then talked about whatever piece of literature or film he wanted to talk about anyway. Like in a way, it wasn't kind of Trumpy enough. Like the Trump mythology stuff was just sort of like an afterthought for him having a bit of a ramble about whatever the fuck piece of pop culture or literary history ephemera he wanted to talk about at the time.
Yeah, so this book is at its best. So talking about positive aspects, it's at its best when he's embracing the ridiculousness of I guess the mythopoeic nature of Donald Trump. Making absurd mythologies around Donald Trump and basing them chapter by chapter on, okay, here is the myth of Donald Trump through a Lovecraftian lens. Here is the myth of Donald Trump through the Great Gatsby. That that's funny. It just didn't change enough or didn't offer any surprises beyond, okay, here is Donald Trump being mythologized in the voices of different literary traditions or of different authors. It didn't change enough or offer surprises beyond that to sustain its length. If this were 10 pages of just these things, of like Donald Trump fighting the swamp as a Lovecraftian monster, that'd be great. I would be reviewing this very positively. But it went on too long without changing. Okay, so here I can read some quotes actually to illustrate the bits that I really enjoyed.
Please do.
So here we go. So from the chapter, In the Chthonic Realms of Power, Trump's Colossal Endeavor. First, Constantin describes the swamp, which is, I quote, not merely a political construct, but an entity, ancient, unknowable, its first tendrils reaching back for eons, far beyond the inception of the nation itself. Its origins are lost in time, rumoured in esoteric circles to be older than the Republic, perhaps even older than man. He goes on to say, enter Trump with his golden mane, a man of defiance against the spectral gloom. He perceived the treacherous undercurrents that others either chose to ignore or were, perhaps, ensnared by. With audacious proclamations, he not only recognised the malefic presence, but vowed to cleanse it. However, he was not merely challenging an institution. He was invoking the wrath of ancient and indescribable forces that had remained uncontested for epochs. So, if this book were 10 to 15 pages of that, of just unabashed silliness, I would recommend this book to basically anyone. Anyone who can tolerate talking about Donald Trump in a way that isn't ostentatious, performative, hair-pulling, teeth-gnashing, etc. But the problem is, it's not just that. It's like you said, it is that combined with a really, just like a smooth brain reading, or the most basic reading of Trump, of like, I suppose a positive reading of Trump, of, oh, well, he's our guy, he's battling the swamp, he's battling the deep state, he's gonna get it done. He got knocked back, or he didn't achieve everything he wanted to in his first term because he underestimated the enormity of the task, but he's going to be back and he's going to do it. He's going to finally do it in 2024. That's the extent of the political analysis. The extent of the literary analysis is basically, haha, isn't it funny that we have Donald Trump in Lovecraft land? And the Spenglerian analysis is pretty bare as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like part of the real problems of the book is that, like, that quote that you read out about the swamp, and it's, I think the phrase "it's eldritch energy" is used at some point. Like that sort of seems promising, but like part of the promise of the book is that it's called Esoteric Trumpism, but it actually is nowhere near esoteric enough. Like, no. I thought, like, if it had gone like quite deep. And I guess if it had just like sustained one theme from one of these authors, like Donald Trump, I think it would have been better if I just had like a Spenglerian analysis of Donald Trump for 160 pages rather than mashing in all of these other authors, because he just sort of like, he asserts that the swamp has been here forever. It's got eldritch energies. Its tendrils are going everywhere. It's, it's not just attached to the United States. It stretches back from time immemorial. Like, if we'd really gone on with a so I don't know, a Julius Evola sort of level of esotericism, then it would have been quite enjoyable. But I don't know, it just doesn't live up to the promise of it. But anyway, I feel like we're being too negative. What are some positive things about this book? Like, we've got what are the major themes? We've got the swamp, and we've sort of got Trump as a great hero. But is there anything more we can really say about it? Like, because I mean, the Spenglerian analysis was pretty thin. He sort of he makes a sort of few assertions about America being in a period of decline, or the West is in a period of decline, but maybe, just maybe, with enough will, enough power, one great individual can turn the tide. And it's sort of like, it didn't really add
That's
up.
quite un-Spenglerian, which is
Yeah.
very strange for a man like Constantin von Hoffmeister, who must know Spengler inside out, certainly better than I do.
Hmm.
Because I can briefly go over this book's Spenglerian reading of Trump, which is what I bought this book expecting. But it's effectively that the West is in a period of decline, as all cultures and civilizations go through, as the natural life cycle of the world soul goes through. We're in the stage of civilization where the Western soul has been exhausted, or its creative energies have been exhausted. We're in the winter of its life cycle. And Spengler believed that in this period there would be an era of Caesarism, where failing institutions lead to power being increasingly concentrated in the hands of one person. And this happening it doesn't necessarily stem the tide of decline, which Hoffmeister seemed to be saying in this book, which is not a very Spenglerian statement, because the decline is inexorable. Instead, it gives some sort of order during the decline, because you have, instead of these rotten, failing institutions failing to maintain order, you have some sort of reintegration, or pale reintegration of political order. Sort of, I think Spengler referred to it as a senile recapitulation of previous order, in the same way that you have a second religiosity, which is a senile recapitulation of the true organic religiosity that was present in the spring and summertime of this particular culture's soul. And so he goes on from briefly explaining Caesarism to saying that Donald Trump is the Caesar figure. But like you pointed out, he seems to indicate that this Caesar figure in Donald Trump, with sufficient will be able to turn around the decline, which isn't a Spenglerian analysis.
No.
I'd be more than happy to, or at least I wouldn't criticize him quite as much on this point if he hadn't billed this book as a Spenglerian reading of Trump. But I was promised an esoteric Spenglerian reading of Donald Trump, and I was really looking forward to it. I hope my disappointment in failing to receive such a conceptually strong book, I hope that's being conveyed. I'm not joking when I'm saying I was actually looking forward to this.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it too, and I must say that when I read like the first 20% or so, I thought this is promising. It did seem promising. It had a good start, and like it also, the fact that the book was sort of psyched up so much by its two forewords, one by Roarig Nationalist and the other by some Kirkpatrick guy who I don't know, but I gather he's some I don't know, some former normie conservative who has been completely Trump-pilled and is now he's contributing forwards to Constantin von Hoffmeister's Arctos editions. Can you imagine what that guy's wife must feel? This guy is just a psycho. But I'm actually... Yeah,
the two Fords were quite... The two Fords got me actually really pumped up as well.
Yeah.
Because Roarig Nationalist one was sort of expected. He was doing his usual shtick of combining pop culture, I guess, sort of not quite saying out loud, but hinting at some desire for, I guess, a greater role for the white race in Western politics. And then the Kirkpatrick guys was promising because it emphasized the Spenglerian angle. And so I was really looking forward to getting Spenglerian Trump. The first few chapters of the book I was actually really enjoying. Like, there's this one chapter called The Proclamation of the Last Days, which is so delightfully histrionic. It's framing Trump in biblical terms and is a hilarious chapter. it opens by quoting Revelation, and then goes from quoting Revelation to altering it to refer to America and Donald Trump, and it's so good. I quote, where he's talking about America. On its once tranquil streets, there arose a clamour reminiscent of the trumpets heralding the Last Judgment. Bands of marauders, proclaiming allegiance to the cause of Black Lives Matter, took up their banners and marched. In their wake, there was not the promise of justice they proclaimed, but the ravages of Bedlam and the smouldering remnants of a nation's pride. The earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. Isaiah 24:19.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And then framing like Donald Trump's presidential campaign as a war in heaven between the archangels and the forces of Satan. That was very fun. Also, comparing Trump to Christ was...
Yeah. It's not often enough done.
Yeah. He's filling a screaming need in the market.
Yeah.
a void of Trump-Christ comparisons. But I was feeling good. I thought, okay, it's not a Spenglerian analysis. It's not quite what it was billed as. But I can live with biblical retellings of the 2020 campaign where Trump was, in the telling of von Hoffmeister, robbed of his apotheosis in the presidential office. But even then, these failed to develop. After a while, and it does feel strange saying this, the fantastical literary descriptions of Trump and his supporters
get boring.
It gets
Get boring. Because I found the first part of this book like so easy to read, and then I just found myself like in such desultory fashion, just flipping through a few pages and being like, "Oh, fuck this." Actually, yesterday I read a few chapters of it. I was minding my son, so I had him on my lap, and I was just reading it to him out loud. And then, like after a while, I got
like, son's going to grow up to work for Arctos Media if you're not careful.
Yeah, I'm like, God, this is boring. I just pulled out a novel and started reading that instead. But actually, I do have a question for you, because I watched the interview with von Hoffmeister talking about this book, and to be honest, it was a pretty thin interview as well. And there was there was a big question. I thought maybe I'm missing something, because the interviewer said to him, he's like, "Look, obviously your title is an allusion to the well-known school of thought called Esoteric Hitlerism." And I was like, and I just didn't know. I'm like, and he's like, I'm like, what is Esoteric Hitlerism? Is this something that I'm meant to be familiar with? And how does it inform how we should look at Hoffmeister's work?
So, in a normative sense, yes, you are supposed to be familiar with it.
Yeah.
So,
I missed that day of school.
The mandatory unit in first year undergrad for every university student on esoteric Hitlerism. So I've not read any works of esoteric Hitlerism. We've got a number of requests to do something on esoteric Hitlerism. The problem is some of the seminal texts in the esoteric Hitlerist canon, such as Adolf Hitler, The Last Avatar by Miguel Serrano, it's like fucking 800 pages or some shit. And I don't know if I can read about how Hitler is the incarnation of some particular Hindu deity for 800 pages. I think we would need much bigger cash income from Patreon for me to be willing to do that.
People pay you $10 for every word you read. So worth it.
So I'm not sure where esoteric Hitlerism started. I think one of the seminal figures in it is Savitri Devi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but she was a fascist. I think she was something like she was born in France but grew up in Greece or something like that. And she was she was involved with the Nazis when they were actually ruling, and then
What a euphemistic thing to say. She was involved with the Nazis.
she was a non-associate of the Nationalist Socialist Party. She was also then a leading member of neo-Nazi underground groups after the war. And what she did is she basically blended together Hinduism and fascism, where Hitler was, I forget which particular deity Hitler was the incarnation of. He was like probably Shiva. Let me have a look.
Google search. Which Hindu deity was Hitler the incarnation of? Frequently asked questions.
Yeah. She did this. She stated that the reason why Hitler was defeated was because he was incarnated in a merciful form, but he will return as an unmerciful incarnation and finish the job. You had other people like Miguel Serrano who wrote the classic Adolf Hitler the Ultimate Avatar, or Adolf Hitler the Last Avatar, depending on the translation, where I think he also situates Hitler as some sort of incarnated deity. I'm not sure if Serrano did so within the Hindu canon. Here we go. Okay, so I can quote from Goodreads.com about Adolf Hitler the Ultimate Avatar. A book describing the ongoing titanic and eternal battle between gods and devils, between a dark force, a satanic spirit, and a coming or returning Hyperborean Aryan age. The memory of the blood, this is the central theme in the book. Crucial for the understanding of this enlightening epic, a spiritual odyssey, a voice, hearkening from a distant primordial past, still lingers in those Aryans still loyal to their race. A voice beckoning the Hyperborean archetype, urging those attuned to it to a finite fight to the finish against the eternal enemy. A spiritual battle comparable to the Mahabharata, a battle closing a great cycle of time and consequently opening another. 969 pages, hardcover.
Yeah, 969 pages. I just like the idea of him just penning the last sentence on page 916 and being like, there, done.
Not a single wasted word.
No, not a single wasted word. But like, this is part of the problem. I mean, like, that sounds quite elaborate and developed. Well, I mean, 916 pages. I hope it was developed. But like, this esoteric Trumpism, like, he doesn't backfill the story anywhere near enough. Like, because like, I mean, what I wanted to get out of this was for my, the everyday part of my brain to be like, all right, well, this is obviously stupid, but I wanted the deep well within me to be like sort of filled up like with like stirred with passions of like, yeah, I fucking love Trump, like, yeah, and like, and it's part of a great mythic battle. And you know that feeling you get when the sensible part of you wants the crazy right-wing demagogue to lose, and then the animal part of your brain is like, well, wouldn't it be great if you won? Like, what if you won? Like, you didn't get that at all. And
trumping.
And what I also found is that like this guy von Hoffmeister, he seems almost he kind of seemed oddly afraid of taking his thesis to the darker corners. I mean, I also found this in the interview I watched with him. Like he made too many positive nods to liberal democracy, and like the speech that he writes for Trump somewhere around the middle of the book is like completely, I don't know, it's sort of like consciously trying to fit itself within the Lincolnian tradition of American oratory. And it just like, I'm like, no, I don't fucking want that at all. I want fucking crazy right-wing hooliganism. That's what I want. With magical properties.
The esoteric aspect of the hooliganism is very important. That was something I did want to bring up with you, because I'm not sure how familiar you are with other authors published by Arctos, but
Not,
Arctos is a
I think
broad church.
maybe Julius Evola if he was an Arctos
Yeah.
one, but I don't think anyone else.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, Arctos is a broad enough church that plenty of them are not church-going, being pagans, and regarding Christianity as a Jewish Semitic invasion of the European mind.
Yeah.
So
Good,
I'm sure
good.
there are some of them who are more traditional conservatives in the Anglo-Saxon tradition. There are probably a few of them, but most Arctos books I've read have been illiberal or wanted, depending on your view of time, either a post-liberalism or a cyclical return to a pre-liberal, primordial Western spirit, which then made Hoffmeister's constant, almost preemptive apologies in part, it felt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very strange how he has several moments where he talks about the need for America to return to its time when people could have open debates without fear of being shouted down, where people could enjoy freedom. Because these are the sorts of things where at least much of the Arctos catalogue explicitly says that things like the liberal democratic conception of freedom is toxic and corrosive. Things like democracy are an extension of that.
Yeah. I mean, like, take this. Like, this is from a chapter called America's Race Question, which, if you'd flip through the book, you'd be like, yes, that's exactly what I want. An autistic German dude.
That's why I paid $5 for this ebook.
Yeah, exactly. But then listen to this. I mean, look how boring and milquetoast this is. He's making reference to the African-American gay author James Baldwin, who, I don't know, he wrote sometime in the 20th century. Quote, while some might view the post-1965 era as a transition from a predominantly white identity, Baldwin would contend that America's true vigor is rooted in the intertwined stories of its citizens. It is worth mentioning that during his tenure, Trump frequently emphasized his dedication to representing Americans across racial lines, championing a vision of unity in a diverse nation. This statement encapsulates his sentiment, now he's quoting Trump, and as I have said many times before, no matter the color of our skin, we all live under the same laws, we all salute the same great flag, and we are all made by the same almighty God. We must love each other, show each other affection, and unite together in condemnation of hatred, bigotry, and violence. We must rediscover the bonds of love and loyalty that bring us together as Americans. End quote. It's the hatred and bigotry and violence that I buy a book like this for.
Yeah, because then I like give a counterpoint to that with another quote. Society, already strained by the weight of modernity and its attendant cosmic horrors of liberal degeneracy, began to unravel further. And then he starts talking about horrific crimes committed by migrants. Yeah, there's a bit of whiplash with him. He, in places, it almost feels like he's going to turn into a crusty American conservative and start quoting Martin Luther King Jr. or something like that.
Yeah. And he quotes Churchill far too much. I mean, I like Churchill, but like it's not appropriate in a book on esoteric Trumpism.
Yeah, I found that irritating, and it made it harder to pick out what Constantin von Hoffmeister's actual political beliefs are. And like I guess, you can't demand this of every book, but in a book seeking to set out the tenets of Trumpism, or the esoteric tenets of Trumpism, I do kind of expect a bit more coherence. Yep. Whereas this really does seem to be a series of fan fiction essays, which rely on the trappings of absurdity of Trump in the various different sort of situations that we've talked about, but not giving any sort of explanation as to what Trumpism is, let alone esoteric Trumpism.
Yeah.
The section on the southern border was very funny. I do want to read out a quote that I laughed out loud at when I first read it. A menace as ancient as the cosmic winds and as inexorable as the tentacles of the eldritch gods that dwell in the abyss, began its encroachment upon the nation's frontier. From the southernmost boundary, where the mundane world touched upon a realm of unknown horrors, an unprecedented surge of beings, strangers to the land and mysterious in their intent, came forth. The numbers, unfathomable to the human mind, akin to the unknowable vastness of the cosmos, swelled with each passing moon. The guardians of the realm, those tasked with holding the line between order and chaos, found themselves overpowered, not by might, but by the sheer unstoppable tide of existence. The border, that fragile threshold, was like an ancient tome whose seals were broken, revealing the secrets that many deemed unspeakable. I do have to give it to the author. I've never come across as funny a description of illegal immigration across the southern border of the United States of America.
Yeah. But like part of why that is so good and true is because, like, you know, this book would have been successful had it operated on the same plane as someone like Julius Evola. If he were to say, look, we're not going to deal with, you know, humdrum materialist reality. We're operating on a deeper realm of concepts. And then he'd sort of extrapolated them, like, you know, like the idea that migrants are a cosmic force that is incalculable to the human mind. I mean, obviously that's not really true if we talk about it in practical terms, but like if he just said, all right, I'm going to completely disavow any reference to material reality when I'm talking about this and just purely assess all these phenomena as, you know, great metaphysical forces, then it would have been great. But he didn't do that.
Because there's part of the reason why I'm so negative about this book is it's just so ripe with potential. So you were mentioning the practical matters of not being able to count the number of people coming over the border. Just imagine trying to come up with a policy platform were you to understand Mexico as a place of unknowable horrors. There's so much that you could do with esoteric Trumpism, and that the sky's the limit, or the cosmos is the limit. It's just this book feels so curtailed. Yeah, it feels like he's strangely hedging to, I'm not sure, protect his reputation by every now and then throwing in some liberal platitude.
Yeah.
Or I don't really understand why it feels so hedged.
Yeah, what is this guy? I mean, I assume this guy has like a day job as a lecturer or something, because that's the impression I got in the interview with him as well. And like, because he made another comment about, you know, how the alt-right had failed. This was in the interview, not in the book. It talks about why the alt-right had failed, and he sort of he censured the white nationalist Richard Spencer for, I think, engaging in too many Heil Hitlers. And he's like, that was bad strategy. He's like, that was bad strategy. And, you know, you can't go around worshipping America's enemies like Hitler. But I don't know. I'm like, yeah, but what do you, like, either put both feet in this retarded realm that you're obviously interested in and write a proper book, or just don't write at all. Like, he also made reference to his family, so maybe he doesn't want to, like, but like, also don't write these books under your own name. Like, you know, you could just do a raw egg nationalist and just be Anyway,
you're right. Yeah, because raw egg nationalist, because of his pseudonym, is able to fully inhabit the realm of pure mental retardation, whereas Constantin von Hoffmeister he's lukewarm. He's neither hot nor cold. which means he can neither deliver a sensible book nor can he deliver a completely frivolous but thoroughly entertaining book. So speaking of mental retardation, like, this is not, I guess, no. So this is the form of being retarded, but it's not the spirit of it. But nonetheless, in small doses, the form can be fun. I do want to read this quote, and where he starts talking about He-Man, I had to look up He-Man because I didn't watch it as a kid. But
Yeah.
having seen He-Man, it makes this quote even funnier.
He's
And
really buff.
this author seems so humorless that I just have to assume that this part is serious, which makes me like it even more. I quote, "The archetype we have to strive for is He-Man, but what we got is Prince Adam. He-Man represents the Western man in both attack and active defense mode. He-Man actively fights Skeletor and his minions who want to rule Eternia and usher in an era of darkness. Beastman represents the subhuman and literally beastly quality of the villains that He-Man has to vanquish in order to save his kith and kin. Prince Adam lives a life of flippancy in the illusory safety of his castle, unaware of the nefarious storm brewing outside its walls. Today, we have mostly gay and emasculated Prince Adams in the besieged West. The power of Grayskull is still eluding us, but as the first election of Trump showed, the magical transformation of Prince Adam into He-Man might not be too far off. Or to put it more eloquently in a Kantian-style categorical imperative, it is time to raise the sword and proclaim, I have the power. There is no other alternative." I also like the idea of that final bit being the categorical imperative. It's what was the precise formulation of the categorical imperative? You know, it's something that you would will to be the case in all situations. Is that roughly it?
I don't know. I don't know. Can't.
Something
but like, as I read that, I was like,
universal law. But I love the idea of a universal.
I was like, he is not using that correctly. Like, I didn't know anything about
Kant. Raise
Kant.
the sword and proclaim, I have the power. There is no other alternative. It's
as Kant wrote in his diaries. It's fucking retarded.
This is what Kant was on about. This is why he's so famous.
Yeah. he was always saying things like that.
Yeah, he just spent all of his time watching He-Man in Königsberg, every now and then writing some philosophy about He-Man.
Also, did you get far enough into your explorations of He-Man to know who the fuck Prince Adam was? Because like, I was just a bit confused
I typed in
because I
He-Man
knew
on
Prince,
YouTube and saw that it was a kind of funny cartoon, and then I stopped. I think I watched about 15 seconds of He-Man.
Like,
and thought, okay, I've got the picture.
I was familiar with He-Man as a term, like as like, you know, he's really buff. He looks like He-Man. He's a He-Man. But I'd never seen it or I'd never read the comic books. And so I was sort of like confused. I'm like, wait, who the hell is Prince Adam? And then I was trying to like go through members of the royal family. Like, is there a Prince Adam that's like a famous homosexual?
I had to look up Skeletor because there's a guy at my gym who describes anyone who's not really, really jacked as Skeletor. And so that was my introduction to Skeletor. But Skeletor is apparently a copyrighted character.
Okay.
So,
Like,
have to let my friend at the gym know that he's got to stop calling people Skeletor and infringing upon, I don't know who owns the rights to Skeletor, but infringing their property rights.
Constantin von Hoffmeister, probably.
That would be very good if he also had actually been the creator or was the creator of He-Man. It is this really strange part of the online right, like the Twitter right, where they're obsessed with children's cartoons or films, like He-Man. They really like Conan the Barbarian. They really like Star Wars and like trying to draw right-wing moral lessons from these sorts of things. He just like, I know that we both appear on a podcast where we read books, which is itself nerdy, but looking for fucking moral lessons in Star Wars and trying to build your like return to trad life on the basis of that is just such nerdy fucking shit. It's so hard to take it seriously. Like, I enjoy ridiculous, sort of, I get frivolous political ideas. I really do like it. It's just past a certain point of self-importance when you're analysing fucking Saturday morning cartoons to try to work out how to defeat liberalism with it. I just think, can you be at least a little bit serious?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think part of the problem with these people is that, you know, I have no objection to watching frivolous television. I watch so much frivolous television. I used to watch, my brother and I, after school, we used to watch a long-running American soap opera called The Bold and the Beautiful. But I've never tried to like force an intellectual respectability on these habits. Just like admit to yourself that it's a moral failing that you do this, or it's just, or it's simply something you enjoy that has nothing to do with the rest of your brain. But don't like you like watching kids' cartoons, and that's fine. But no one else needs to give a shit. Even like I guess, and for 15 minutes can sort of appreciate the sort of, you know, Jordan Peterson sort of mode of approach where he'll get like a bit of popular culture and he'll explain how it's just retelling the story of a bunch of mythological archetypes that have been with us for centuries and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's fine. But like, even that is admitting that, you know, the later cultural productions are not presenting anything radically new. I mean, like, so like Star Wars, like he talks about Star Wars for a chapter in this, doesn't he?
I think so. I think he certainly mentions Star Wars. But to what you were saying before, I think there is a difference between the sort of Jordan Peterson for more right-leaning people or the Slavoj Žižek Lacanian interpretation of Kung Fu Panda for those more left-leaning.
Yeah.
I still see that is subtly but importantly different from this particular sort of right Twitter raw egg nationalist project of trying to give intellectual respectability to watching children's cartoons. Because when Slavoj Žižek is offering his Lacanian analysis of some children's movie, it's not that he's trying to lend intellectual weight to it. He's trying to, oftentimes in what I think of as a fairly silly fashion, but nonetheless he's trying to do this. He's trying to use it to describe what is happening in culture at the moment. And right Twitter people, they're doing that, but in addition to that, they're also trying to, or it seems to be, they're trying to lend a respectability to watching these cartoons, which I just don't think
not deserve.
I just don't think that's something you should waste your time on.
It's not.
I think you put it perfectly before. You just acknowledge it. It's a moral failing if you're 30 years old and you just fucking love He-Man. If that's the case, fine. But just don't pretend that there's an intellectual depth there.
and more to the point, like, have enough self-respect not to announce it to the world. This is what you do in your spare time. Like, and then like, I mean, I feel like I'm probably going on a bit of a rant here, but like, and then
please go on a rant, because we do need to talk for at least an hour about this. And
so many of the same people will then turn around and like castigate women for not being interested in the right kinds of things or the right kinds of men. Well, if you're the kind of guy that watches He-Man like at age 30 or something, and then just like subjects it to absolutely nauseatingly tedious cultural analysis, and do you expect to ever get fucked by anyone?
I find it has always worked for me on a first date if I start telling my this woman I hope to bed about my deep parallel readings of He-Man comics and Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. The deep similarities between those two works.
It's such a window into, it's like, you know, just the
mental
kind of
illness.
Yeah, but like the real male sort of autistic mental illness that is a little part of every human brain. Like, women just must be like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's like, this is such a man book. This is truly a book that I can't imagine a woman writing.
No. Like, what? But then again, Constantin von Hoffmeister, like, to judge from his YouTube interview, he's like a pretty normal looking dude. He's not like a bad looking dude. He just looks like a fucking, what you imagine if you imagine like a German IT office worker. Like, he's fine. and he has kids and stuff. So
So would you say he's physiognomically suited to write this sort of book or not?
Yeah. To be honest, I feel like he could have been. See, okay, this might be part of the problem. Maybe he's not ugly enough to have written a truly excellent work of esoteric
So
Trumpism.
if he were uglier, he would have more hatred
Yeah.
that would overcome the liberal hedging that he keeps irritatingly doing when discussing things like the race question or the chapter the race question or whatever it is in esoteric Trumpism. The impurities weren't washed away by the white hot searing hatred that he would have had were he very, very ugly.
If you were very ugly. Actually, that's probably not a bad way to go about choosing future material, just like to see how ugly the author
Purely
is.
on looks.
We're going to judge this by looks alone.
I've always felt that literary criticism doesn't have a physiognomic enough bent.
Yeah. yeah. I always appreciate one of my favorite books, and it's a fairly normie book, but it's a book called Modern Times by the historian Paul Johnson. And Paul Johnson had pretty conventional conservative, neoconservative views, but like he had this great asset as a historian is that whenever there was somebody that he didn't like, he would always comment on their personal appearance and their breath. He would always.
That's a noble thing to do, though.
Like I remember he wrote this article on, I think it was maybe around the time of the death of the Marxist historian Eric Hobsbawm, and it was like it opened. I don't know. It opened like with a whole bunch of reasonable criticisms of Hobsbawm, and it was just like a standalone sentence. It said he was also incredibly ugly.
It's the perfect combination of being something that you would say it's intellectually not relevant, but it's also inescapably true. Like,
but I think it actually might be
criticism.
relevant. I think it might be relevant. That's the thing.
It could be relevant in two ways. So one, it's the nurture component. You know, have you been twisted by living in a world as an ugly person? Become more bitter as a result. But then there's the nature component. Is it shining forth exteriorly what is interior? Is your external ugliness representative of something deeper? Which is to say, maybe this is such a... It feels like a normie, or like a normal person trying to write something outrageously right-wing. And maybe it's because Constantin von Hoffmeister isn't ugly. He looks too normal. And as such, he writes normal books, no matter how hard he tries.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
I hope we're the first physiognomic review of his book.
Yeah,
we probably are.
So I just wanted to find this Paul Johnson line because it made me laugh. All right, here it is. This is like from an obituary written in 2012. The recent death at age 95 of Eric Hobsbawm removed the last of the Stalinists. During his long life, Hobsbawm remained true to his faith, not resigning from the Communist Party until 1991, by which time Stalin's Soviet Union had ceased to exist. Hobsbawm's devotion prompts a question: what leads intellectuals, otherwise skeptical of most phenomena, to adore such monsters? Hobsbawm was by trade a historian. According to his left-wing admirers, he was brilliant. In the opinion of the rest, he was unreadable. He was also spectacularly ugly. No, he does elaborate on it though. He says, the theory among cynics is that Hobsbawm was so angry with God for making him hideous that he was determined to back whoever was God's most resolute opponent.
It's a brilliant literary technique where you use a succession of reasonable statements to lure in the reader before hitting them with, I am now going to comment upon how ugly this man was after he died.
It was published in Forbes as well. Okay. I feel like we should say more about the book.
Yeah. So the irritating hedging that we kept talking about, how... So... This is after a chapter where Trump is compared favorably to George Washington because both of them sought to create a haven of democracy and liberty and maintaining America's core values. And there are a number of platitudes that probably wouldn't feel out of place at like the Democratic Party convention or something like that. But then the next chapter, Trump and Stoddard, parallels in rhetoric. So apparently Lothrop Stoddard was an early 20th century American political theorist who wrote the book The Rising Tide of Colour Against the White World. The Rising Tide of Colour Against White World Supremacy, which emphasised the importance of maintaining white Western identity and racial purity. And Stoddard was concerned about race mingling and things like that. And actually, having said that, I think it's a while since we've talked about
race mingling
on this podcast. So it's good to bring it back. Today I finished reading the Turner Diaries for a future episode. So I've got for fans of Levi and I talking about race mixing. You're gonna love the episode on that.
Can I just interject? I think this is this Stoddard book. I think this is the book that is referenced in The Great Gatsby. Remember when Tom Buchanan, he's at near the start of the book, he's talking about how he's reading this book about how all the colors are going to take over the white world. I think, if not the actual book itself, I think it was a reference to this book. And I thought maybe, I'm not saying I don't want to read this book, but I think you and Levi should maybe review The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. I would listen to that episode.
If it's a really long book, because the problem with a lot of these books that sound promising is they're really long. And I feel like we would need to be paid more money for me to be willing to really commit to, for example, 900 pages of Adolf Hitler, the ultimate avatar.
This one's only 320 pages, apparently.
Possible.
Yeah, possible. Okay. All right, sorry, go on.
Anyway, no, it's just more of Constantin von Hoffmeister's lukewarm writing, where he clearly seems to want to talk about race mixing. And
yeah, he does.
And I guess he never says that Trump is explicitly worried about race mixing. I quote, and sort of the high school essay style of a lot of Hoffmeister's prose can be really funny. I quote, "The issue of immigration has been central to Trump's campaign and presidency. He often expresses concerns about unchecked immigration, leading to cultural and economic challenges. We have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out," Trump remarked during one of the presidential debates, emphasizing the need for stringent immigration measures. So what he does here is Hoffmeister obviously wants to talk about race mixing.
Yep.
He likes Trump, and he mentions the two of them sort of in parallel and hopes that those who have eyes to see and ears to hear will understand the link being drawn between the two.
Yeah.
But he won't come out and say it, which I find irritating, and then hedges with liberal platitudes, and it immeasurably weakens this work.
I think he's just fundamentally dishonest. Okay? He's just dishonest. I mean, like, why the fuck would you write a chapter? Like, you've obviously read this book and like this book by Stoddard, The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. And then, like he says both Trump and Stoddard have, in their unique ways, voiced skepticism about unfettered globalization. Like, you don't need to interject Stoddard into this to make that point. Like, why you bring him up other than just like to elicit some, some subtextual thrill from people who also like that, and they're like, I know why you're bringing him up. I know why you're juxtaposing those guys. It's just like, similarly, Stoddard's views, while controversial today, reflected widespread concerns about race and civilization as the colonial era drew to a close and the world grappled with the consequences of large-scale migration and global conflict. Like, okay, reflected widespread concerns. Are they your concerns? Be honest, Hoffmeister. just level with us. I don't mind if you're a disgraceful racist. In fact, I would really enjoy reading about it. But anyway.
It's also, to your point before about how is he writing in this way so that those who know about this particular book, although you could infer a lot about it from the title, we'll get a subtextual thrill out of it. But the problem is this is being published by Arctos Media.
If you can't tell the truth there.
No one reading this is not looking for that. And also, why is he hedging? Is he worried that, if this gets reviewed in The Guardian, they might realise that I would like more white people in the Western world and fewer non-white people and give me a bad review for it? I'm just not sure who it's for. Why keep hedging when the only people reading this, the only people who fucking know what Arctos Media is, are going to have Constantin von Hoffmeister's politics clocked pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why I'm sort of interested in what the Hoff does for a full-time job. Again, why would you publish in your own name? If you want to say what you really feel, just use a pseudonym.
I mean, the Hoff could be one of the Twitter anons as well.
Yeah.
The Hoff's where he publishes his more temperate work, and the insane right-wing schizo ramblings on Twitter are under an assumed name.
Okay. I gotta say, I'm just keep gazing at this Wikipedia page on the rising tide of color against white world supremacy. First of all, it has such an excellent cover, but then just
really?
Listen to this description in Wikipedia. To counter the perceived geopolitical threat, Stoddard advocated Nordicism, racial segregation, and general racism.
General racism.
After
covered. Wow. Look at that. So for readers, I'll paint a picture with my words, but it's a stylized image where you have the globe. You have maybe the top quarter of the globe in the bottom right corner. Is this the one you're looking at, Ed?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And you have three figures crawling menacingly along the globe. One is an African-looking silhouette with tangled hair and a spear. The one behind it is what looks like an
Oriental
Asian man with one of those hats that Vietnamese people wear, waving a sword. And the person behind it, the silhouette behind him is too hard to make out, but he's holding a rifle. I can only assume that
Arab,
he's a non-white man.
I think judging from the white outline, I think he's meant to be wearing some kind of headdress. I think he's probably meant to be
he's wearing a suspicious item of clothing.
I feel like I feel like I've seen that silhouette on the cover of a book that I also like. I haven't read this book. Another book that I like by Arthur Conan Doyle called The Tragedy of the Korosko, where a bunch of Arabs kidnap some nice white people on a tour of Egypt. Anyway, but I feel like there was an image like that kind of 1920 and earlier sort of silhouette style Arab. Anyway, so
yeah, that is it's striking cover art. It does make me consider this book more seriously.
Nordicism, Jack. Advocated Nordicism, racial segregation, and general racism.
That's lovely. The non-specificity of general racism. I don't particularly care how you do it. Just make sure you're doing it.
All right. Well, that sounds like a more fun book. Let's get back onto this less fun book.
Okay, so towards the end, you start getting more chapters about just really, really surface level analyses of Trump being a popular politician in the United States. And those are really boring.
Yeah.
If I want a reality-based analysis of Donald Trump, not Donald Trump as the Don with the Freedom Riders, as a post-apocalyptic motorcycle gang fighting over the final the final, was it like the final oil pumping well in America against the Red Warlords, a gang who are basically the Democrats. And
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't come to the person who writes that for reality-based political commentary. And so I guess the overarching question of all of this while I was reading is, who is this book for? Because it's for people who want a Spenglerian reading of Trump, which is what I initially wanted. It's not for them because there's so little of that. For people who want a narrativized, a mythological Donald Trump, there is that. It's just so fragmented that no one story gets moving beyond the initial amusement of Donald Trump in a novel, silly situation.
Yeah.
For the person who wants a political analysis of Donald Trump, it's just so bare bones and shallow that I can't imagine anyone enjoying it from that perspective. I really don't know who this is for. It feels like at least 3 different books, all in varying stages of incompletion, mashed together.
Yeah, like even like I have to assume this is true of most chapters, but like the chapters where he talked about something that like I know a little bit about, like the chapters like comparing Trump and Mussolini or Trump and Viktor Orban, like all it kind of really boiled down to was like, there are these 2 guys, they're both charismatic, and I like them. And you're like,
yeah,
good on you, Hoff. Like there's nothing more to it. I mean, and also like the leaps in, I think in the Mussolini chapter, like the leaps in logic, he talks about all the things that Mussolini did well without sort of mentioning the fact that he got routed in World War II. and then but like if you're going to enter the realm of ordinary comparison and discussion of historical comparison, then like, you know, what he should have done with that Mussolini chapter is say, but Mussolini failed here for this reason, and this is why Trump's got to do this, but harder. Like that would have been good. But
yeah, well, I did notice that the comparisons between what Mussolini did and what Trump did were also just so.
Like they both did infrastructure projects.
He would basically say something that Mussolini did that he approves of, and then would say something that Trump did that he approves of, but it's only his approval that is the common factor.
Yeah, that's right.
I quote, Mussolini's grandiose vision of a new Roman Empire culminated in the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. While the League of Nations decried this act and imposed sanctions, Italy's eventual victory and annexation of Ethiopia in 1936 was evidence of Mussolini's resolve. This act bolstered his standing at home and sent a message to the world about Italy's imperial ambitions. In a less militaristic but equally assertive vein, Trump's push to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel in 2017, a move that overturned decades of US foreign policy, and the relocation of the American embassy in 2018 from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, showcased his willingness to break from international consensus in favour of decisive action. This move, much like Mussolini's audacious campaigns, strengthened his domestic base, even as it drew international scrutiny and outrage. I would also like to add the irony of the author praising Trump for not engaging in foreign adventurism in previous chapters, while also applauding Mussolini's invasion of Ethiopia.
That's exactly right. Like I don't get it. Like it's just like he talks like, you know, a signal to the world about Mussolini's like whatever neo-Roman imperial ambition. But like you're not meant to like that, Hoff.
Yeah.
And like elsewhere he sort of talks about, you know, how Rome is like an example of a decaying, overstretched civilization, whereas like you want a wholesome nation state. I think somewhere he makes that comment. So like I don't really get why he likes Mussolini or why he doesn't, you know, use that comparison more fruitfully, other than him sucking as a writer.
Yeah, it's not. You brought up some further examples of how uneven this is. So he repeatedly talks about how he doesn't like foreign adventurism, how particularly the Democrats just love invading everyone, which is not strictly untrue, but the Hoff says he doesn't like it, but then talks about how he likes Mussolini's grandiose vision of a new Roman Empire. And part of an empire is annexing territory.
Yeah.
But then, yes, as you said, he also talks about how Rome was exhausted and overstretched because of its imperial ambitions. But then he also talks about how Rome is an example of a tellurocracy as opposed to the thalassocracy of Britain and the coastal elites of the United States, and we should return to the wholesome tellurocracy similar to Rome. These are all describing, to an extent, distinct but overlapping components of Rome, of America. The thing is, he will equally praise and condemn the same thing in both civilizations, depending on the chapter.
Yeah. 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 Also, can you explain, what was that term used before? Because I know I came across that term and I didn't look it up. Tellurocracy?
So this is, I came across this first reading something by Alexander Dugin. Alexander Dugin really liked it. I think Guillaume Fay might have liked it. I'm not sure about Fay, but certainly Dugin does talk about this. So a tellurocracy is a civilization of the earth. They are settled, they like tradition, they're conservative, they value blood over money.
So like Evela's term telluric.
Yeah, of the earth.
Yeah.
And he says Rome was an example of this.
Yeah.
He contrasts this negatively with a thalassocracy, which is a civilization of the sea, such as the British Empire, or now what the coastal elites in America want, which is a trading empire, one that is cosmopolitan rather than focused on its people and its traditions, one that favours money because it is more easily changed, it's more fungible, one that favours rapid changes in culture rather than continuity. And an example is, say, San Francisco, where anyone who's been there knows that within 30 seconds of being in that city, you'll have a group of sandal-wearing, prune juice drinking, dreadlocked, beanie-wearing, tie-dye wearing hippies come and try to reassign your dog's gender. That's the effect of a thalassocracy. But anyway, Constantin von Hoffmeister doesn't like thalassocracies and thinks America should be a tellurocracy.
Yeah. Like, yeah, okay. But it's like, what? Like, he praises Churchill like a bunch, and then like
a man who hated empire.
Yeah, a man who hated empire and definitely did not lead a maritime-oriented nation. Like just, I don't know.
Yeah, you certainly couldn't accuse Constantin von Hoffmeister of being consistent.
No, he's not fucking consistent.
There's not a charge I would level against him.
I gotta say, given that I watched an hour of him talk this morning, like I'm getting more annoyed the more this
you
podcast. Yeah, because like I was reading it, and it's not the first time I've had this experience, but I was like, maybe I'm just not getting it. Like I'll ask Jack, and Jack will be able to tell me what I'm missing. Doesn't sound like I'm missing much.
On reflection, you're right and he's wrong. What you're wanting to say?
Yes, definitely. Like, this guy's a fucking
this episode's become much more negative than I thought it would be. The more I talk about it, the more irritated I am. Mostly because of how fruitful a topic this is. Esoteric Trumpism.
Absolutely.
And how poorly it's been handled here.
Yeah. Like, I mean, honestly, like even just like a pretty boring chapter title, like Rediscovering America, Trump's Return to Classical Values. You're like, all right, well, I mean, that's not, necessarily going to be racist or fun in that way, but it could at least be interesting. You're like, oh, what's the case? And then like, you go to it, it's like, it's easy to write off Trump's appeal as just the voice of those who feel disenchanted, but maybe it is more profound than that. Maybe Trump, with all his brashness, is a reminder of an America that speaks its mind, values its heritage, and does not feel the need to apologize for its position in the world. For the rest of the world, a predictable America is a reliable partner, an America that understands the value of its alliances, but also respects the sovereignty of other nations. Trump's America is not about aggression, but about balance. And you're like, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. Like, this is so boring. This is just like the most lame analysis. And nowhere in this chapter, like, to be frank, is there anything about like a return to classical values, other than if you say classical values are just like the ordinary values that normal people who have common sense have. But like, that's not even a surface level reading of what classical values are. Like, classical values, like, to my mind, but at least hearken to some like intellectually aristocratic notion of like virtues that are hard won through deep reflection and thought and practice. But that's not what it is at all. Like, he's a dilettante, and I'm a serious dilettante. So for me to be leveling his criticism,
dilettantes, we recognise our own.
Yeah, this guy's just a fuck.
Yeah, that particular chapter was neither esoteric nor Trumpian.
No, it wasn't at all. Like because like that topic, that topic is like there are so many like classical warriors that you could compare Trump to. Like I can't remember the line, but there was in 2016 before Trump got elected, there was some line going through like Christian right circles that like this was when they had still had regrets that Trump was not a proper Christian. And like, I can't remember which biblical character they compared him to, but like they were saying like, he's not Jesus, but he's this guy. I can't remember what the name. And like, every now and again you need some guy to break a few eggs to make an omelet and allow Jesus to come after him. I don't know. But it was like, there's that kind of literary analysis where you can say, well, he colors outside the lines. He's a bit of a badass, but sometimes you need a bit of a badass. But like, he doesn't do that at all. It's just, ugh.
Yeah, it's a disappointment more than anything else.
We're disappointed in you, Constantin. It's not that we're irritated, we're disappointed. We're not angry, we're disappointed.
I'd high hopes for this particular book. It won't stop me looking through the Arctos catalogue for something kooky. One comparison that does come to mind actually is Bronze Age mindset, because in many ways, Constantin von Hoffmeister feels like diet Bronze Age pervert.
Yeah.
In that, say, calling your book Esoteric Trumpism, it feels like he's reaching for that same esoteric, slightly spiritual, right-wing, classical antiquity obsessed Twitter right. It feels like he's reaching for that same audience. He's just not as wacky as Bronze Age pervert, so it never lands in the same way. Like Bronze Age pervert shitposting, calling you gay for going to a wine bar, and then talking about chimpanzees masturbating while he eats holy amino acids is that's the wackiness I wanted from this book.
Yeah.
Do you have anything more to say about esoteric Trumpism?
I really don't. Like, I'm as you were talking, I'm sort of scanning through chapters, being like trying to find something a bit more positive to end on. But like, what is the point? I guess I feel like we just haven't quite done justice to like the wholeness of this book. But I don't think it is a whole book. I think it's an incoherent book of stupid blog posts by a retard. but like I feel like there's this like, maybe there should be some themes, some broader themes, like because I think in like the best thing about this book are like it's like the blurb or like the first few chapters, like, and I think the point of this book, were it executed properly, would have been to like actually create a parallel mythological or mythopoetic world that gave the Trump movement a sort of internal spiritual energy. And I think to have achieved that, he would have had to have operated on a separate but equal metaphysical plane. But it doesn't. Is that what you think is the point? Like the point of the book? Like, I wanted to read some poetry about how crazy good Trump was, and magical as well. Really magical. But is there a different point to this book that's other than that?
Look, if there is, then neither of us saw it. it's fine writing a collection of essays or of a collection of essays and fictional works if there's a uniting theme beyond look how funny it is to put Donald Trump in these situations. I'm not sure what it's trying to convey, because any message in this book beyond gee, isn't Donald Trump great will be contradicted by some other chapter in this book. So you don't really have that unifying it. You don't have any sort of growth of the Donald Trump mythical character in it.
Yeah.
You don't really have any situation of Donald Trump in any sort of intellectual tradition, as was promised in the blurb of this book, say in the Spenglerian tradition.
Yeah.
It's just
like this is a let me read 2 paragraphs near the end of the book from a chapter called Death Wish, Bronson's Crusader meets Trump's America, about a film from the 70s called Death Wish. Quote, Death Wish, a 1974 gritty drama starring Charles Bronson as Paul Kersey, serves as an emblematic torchbearer for a certain zeitgeist of urban decay and the strong desire for vigilante justice. Reflecting these very sentiments, the Trump era too sparked a battle cry against what many perceived as a slide into lawlessness, with the former president standing as a watchman against disorder. And then blah 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 blah, end of the chapter. Death Wish serves as an allegorical goldmine when viewed against the legend of the Trump era. Both are tales of resistance and reclamation. Bronson's gritty and unforgettable portrayal of Paul Kersey, a man driven to extremes by circumstances, becomes all the more profound when juxtaposed against the ever unyielding figure of Trump. Whether you listen how much of a pussy he sounds like here. Whether you champion their causes or critique their methods, there is no denying that both have left potent marks in the annals of history and pop culture. It shows art's power and its uncanny ability to portray life, politics, and a myriad shades in between.
Stop fucking hedging.
Yeah, it's just
Say something.
It's just I think we should fucking challenge this guy to a fight. This guy's
To come to his house. In Minecraft, we should come to his house.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't think I don't have anything more to say about this.
I have nothing more to say.
Yeah. Sorry for being so negative, listeners. I'm just disappointed, as you might have gathered. This had a lot of promise.
Great deal of promise. We should rewrite it. To be our project for 2024. We will write the esoteric Trumpism that should have been. The platonic perfect form of esoteric Trumpism.
I'm not going to read this, but I really would like you and Levi to read that miscegenation book, The Rising Tide of Color Against the White World Supremacy. Reader request from me, Levi and Jack, can you read that book by Lothrop Stoddard? I just like the idea. I love the idea of someone advocating Nordicism as well. Nordicism and general racism.
Yeah. All right. Nothing else to say?
No, I've got nothing else. I'm done.
Thanks for listening.
Back to my holiday. Yeah.
See you next time.